Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. I welcome you all to this lecture in the course Sandhi in Paninian Grammar. We continue in this lecture to study Ach Sandhi, namely the vowel Sandhi. We have studied that the Ach Sandhi can be broadly classified into two categories. The first one being Ekasthanika Ekadesha. What this means is that there is one sthani, Eka sthani, and one substitute, Eka adesha. One substituent and one substitute, Ekasthanika Ekadesha, in a given environment. And the second category is Dvisthanika Ekadesha, one substitute in place of two substituents. We shall deal with this little later. Right now we are concentrating and studying on the first category, Ekasthanika Ekadesha. And we noted that there are two instances that are classified under this category. The first one is Yan Sandhi and the second one is Ayavayava Sandhi, out of which we have already studied Yan Sandhi in detail together with the Sutra Iko Yanachi. Now we are studying the second instance of this category, namely Ayavayava Sandhi. To put it diagrammatically, the Ach Sandhi stated by the sutras from 6172 onwards up to 6183, they can be described in the following manner. If you have A plus B as the input, which means that B comes immediately after A, in the environment of this B, A is substituted by C. A is the substituent, C is the substitute. A is the sthani, C is the adesha. A plus B is the input and C plus B is the output. Ekasthani, Eka adesha. Ekasthanika Ekadesha. This is what this diagram represents. Now we studied the Ayavayava Sandhi and the sutra prescribing this particular Sandhi. Echo Yavayavaha 6178. We studied this sutra in detail. We also introduced the Uddeshya Vidheya Bhava and studied the sutra Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha in this context. Now we are looking at the examples of this particular Sandhi. The sutra is Echo Yavayavaha, in which Echaha is in sixth case of H, thereby meaning in place of H. Ayavayavaha is 1/3 of Ayavayav. H is a pratyahara which covers the sutras 4 and 5, and so it represents the sounds A, O, I and Au. Ayavayava has got 4 elements, Ay, Av, Ay and Av. Now in this lecture we study the examples in detail. We have already studied the application of Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha And so the environment being ach stands for the homogeneous sounds of the ach. And so we have the following templates of examples mentioned on the slide. So you have A plus A, and the output after the application of 6178 is I plus A. Here we are showing the Ekasthani in the red ink and the Ekadesha in the blue ink in the environment of A. Similarly, we have A followed by A. In the environment of A gets substituted by I, and so A plus A is the input, and by the application of 6178 the output we get is I plus A. Similarly, A plus E is the input, and after the application of 6178 the output is I plus E. Similarly, we have A plus long E as the input, and the output after the application of 6178 is I plus E. Similarly, A plus U is the input, and after the application of 6178 we get the output, namely I plus U. Then we have A plus long U, and the output is I plus long U. Similarly, we have A plus Ru being the input, and after the application of 6178 we get I plus Ru. A plus long Ru is the input. That means in the environment of long Ru coming immediately after, A gets substituted by I, and so the output after the application of 6178 is I plus long Ru. Then we have A plus Lu as the input, and I plus Lu is the output. Interestingly, we have A plus A as the input, and the output is I plus A. Similarly, A plus O is the input, and the output is I plus O. Similarly, A plus I being the input, and the output is I plus I. And finally, we have A plus Au as the input, 6178 applies, and the output generated is I plus Au. In the environment of Au coming immediately after, A is substituted by I. This is what is the meaning of the sutra Echo Yavayavaha, and can be explained through these template examples. Now we shall take each one of them, each one of these templates, and try to understand the concrete examples where Ayavayava Sandhi takes place. Let us take, for instance, at the beginning, the case where A is immediately followed by A. This is the scope of application of Echoyavayavaha, because the conditions are fulfilled. A is an ach, and this ach is coming immediately after H, namely A over here, and so Echoyavayavaha, its conditions having been fulfilled, applies over here, and then the output generated is I plus A. A is replaced by I, A being the right hand side environment remaining unchanged. So the substituent here is shown in the red ink, and the substitute is shown in the blue ink. Let us look at the concrete examples. We have Hare plus Us. We have 1, 3 of the word Hari, Harihi, Hari, Harayah, Prathama. We are deriving Harayah. So we take the form Hari, and then there is some other operation that takes place which substitutes A in place of E, and so this is in fact an intermediary stage. We had Hari plus Us as the first stage, and then Hari becomes Hare, Hare plus Us, and then this is the condition of Echo Yavayavaha. Conditions being fulfilled, Echo Yavayavaha applies, and the output generated is Haraya plus Us, Harayas, Harayaha. 1/3 of Hari. Then we have another verbal form where we have the verbal root G followed by the suffixes A and T. Once again, this is an intermediary stage where we derive the form Jayati. Now G plus A plus T, and this G is substituted by J, E is substituted by A, and after that the conditions for Echo Yavayavaha are fulfilled. So 6,178 Echo Yavayavaha applies and generates the output, namely Jay plus A plus T. So this A gets substituted by Aya. So Jaya plus A plus T, that is Jayati. Both these examples contain square brackets and all the elements within those brackets. Even this example is of the same kind. We have Se plus A. Se is somebody who is with E. E is the son of Vishnu. So somebody who is with him is called Se. This is the Pratipadika ending in A, in masculine. We don't have other very popular masculine words ending in A which can be cited over here. So this is an artificial example taken from the text called Vaiyakarana Siddhanta Kaumudi. So we have Se, and now we are deriving the instrumental singular of Se. So we have A, the suffix stated over here. A plus A, this A also stands for long A, so that's why this comes in over here. Now Echo Yavayavaha, its conditions are fulfilled, so it applies, and the output generated is Saya plus A, Saya. This is the instrumental singular of Se. Now in all these three cases, all the elements were part of the square brackets. Now next we have example where A comes at the end of a pada, when the second pada, the next pada, begins with a vowel. So Vartate Asha. This is a separate pada, this is another separate pada. At the end of this pada comes A, at the beginning of this pada comes A. And so there Echo Yavayavaha applies, and we get the output Vartataya plus Asha. This A is substituted by Aya. Vartataya plus Asha. We join it together and get Vartataya Asha, or by the application of some other rule which we shall study in the Visarga Sandhi section, we get the form Vartata Asha. These are the examples of A plus A. Now we have A plus E being the input, and Aya plus E is the output. So we have once again the initial two examples where both the words are in the same bracket. This is a compound. The earlier case was that of one pada, Subanta pada being generated. Now this is a compound. So Samhita is obligatory. These two words are uttered in close proximity, and so Sandhi has to happen. There is no optionality available. And so we have se, which is once again an artificial form, and after that the word ishta occurs. So we have a followed by e, which is an ach. So conditions for the application of echoyavayavaha are fulfilled, and so echoyavayavaha 6178 applies and generates the output in the form of saya plus ishta, which when joined together becomes saishta. Similarly, se plus ishvara, another compound, and a is followed by ach in the form of long e, and so we get 6178 to apply, and the output generated is saya plus ishvara, that is saishvara. Now the next two examples are such that a occurs at the end of the pada and e occurs at the beginning of the subsequent pada. Labhate ishtam. Labhate is the active third person singular or pratham purusha ekavachana of the verbal root labha, to obtain. Labhate ishtam. So now in this case, a is followed immediately by e, and so 6178 applies and generates the output labhataya, a becomes aya and ishtam. And by the application of another rule, which we shall study in the Visarga Sandhi section, we get the optional form labhata ishtam, here gets dropped. Similarly, vartate ishvaraha. Here again, a comes at the end of the pada and e comes at the beginning of the subsequent pada, and so 6178 applies. This a is substituted by aya, and so we have vartataya ishvaraha, and by the application of the optional rule, this ya gets dropped or deleted, and we get the forms vartata ishvaraha as well. Now we have examples of a plus u, and the output is aya plus u. Once again we take recourse to the artificial word se, and if this is a compound, se plus ukta, and 6178 applies, and the output generated is saya plus ukta, sayukta. Similarly, se plus udha, where long u comes in, se plus udha, and 6178 applies, and the output generated is saya plus udha, that is sayudha. Both these examples, they are the examples of a compound, which means that both the words are part of one bracket. When there are two words, a comes at the end of the first word and u comes at the beginning of the second word, then what happens? Even there, echoyavayavaha applies. So we have vartate plus upari, and a occurs at the end of this pada, u occurs at the beginning of this pada, and so there is a condition for echoyavayavaha fulfilled, so it gets applied and you get the output vartataya upari and vartata upari as an optional form. Similarly, vartate udhaha, and you have the same conditions with long u at the beginning of the next word, and so you get the Sutra 6178 applying, and vartataya udhaha, that is the output generated, and by the application of another rule you get vartata udhaha as the optional output. Similarly, you have now a plus ru as the input and aya plus ru as the output. So you have se plus rishi. Se is once again an artificial example, and this is a compound. So you have se plus rishi. 6178 applies. This a is substituted by aya, so you have saya plus rishi, sai rishi. Now if we take the examples of two padas, we have vartate plus rishi. A comes at the end of this pada, followed by ru at the beginning of this second pada, and so 6178 applies, and the output generated is vartataya plus rishihi, and so vartata rishihi, that is the optional form generated. Now we have vartate plus rukaraha, long ru. Vartate plus rukaraha. Once again, this is an artificial example. Nonetheless, if A is followed by ru and A appears at the end of the pada, ru appears at the beginning of the next pada, echoyavayavaha applies and the output generated is vartataya plus rukaraha, and the optional output is also generated by the application of another rule. Then we have examples of A followed by lu, and the output generated is aya plus lu. So we have se plus lukara. Once again, this is a compound, and so we have the output generated saya plus lukara, sai lukara. And now at the end of the pada you have vartate plus lukaraha, and 6178 applies, and the output generated is vartataya lukaraha or vartata lukaraha. Now you have A followed by A, and the output generated is aya followed by A. So you have se plus A. Se once again is an artificial form, se plus A, and you have echoyavayavaha applying, and the output generated is saya plus A, and you get the form saye. Similarly, hare plus A, when you are deriving the 4/1 dative singular of the word hari, here is how the derivation goes on. So you have hari plus A, then hari is substituted by hare, E is substituted by A, so you have A followed by A, and then you have echoyavayavaha applying, and so the output generated is haraya plus A, where A is substituted by aya, and then you get the form haraye. Similarly, now these two examples, this one is the example of the dative singular, this is also an example of dative singular, which means within one pada. So samhita is obligatory. Now if we have A coming at the end of the pada and another A coming at the beginning of the next pada, then this is the output. So nivartate plus eshana, and you have nivartataya plus eshana, and this year gets dropped by optionally by another rule, and so we get nivartata eshana as the output. Now we have A plus O as input, and the output generated is aya plus O. So we have se plus os. Now we are deriving the genitive and locative dual of these forms, se and rama. So se plus os, and we have 6178 applying, and the output generated is saya plus os. A is substituted by aya. Saya plus os, sayos, sayoho. When we derive the genitive and locative dual of Rama, we have this stage in the derivation, which is an intermediary stage, Rame plus os. So Rama plus os is the first step. Then we have Rame becoming A by the sutra stated in the Ashtadhyayi. So we have Rame plus os, and then 6178 applies, and A is substituted by aya. So we have the output Ramaya plus os, Ramayos and Ramayoho. Now at the end of the pada, when we have Vartate plus Ojaha, luster, Ojaha, Vartate plus Ojaha. Here we have 6178 applying, and this A coming at the end of the pada is substituted by aya, and we have Vartataya plus Ojaha, and Vartata Ojaha will be the optional derived output by the application of the other rule. Now we have next A plus I as input and aya plus I as the output. So we have a compound se plus aikya, unity with this se plus aikya. So A is substituted by aya by the application of 6178, and so we get the form saya plus aikya, sayaikya. At the end of the pada we have vartate plus aishamaha, vartate plus aishamaha, and a coming at the end of the pada, I coming at the beginning of the next pada. Echo yavayavaha applies and a is substituted by aya. So we have vartataya plus aishamaha and vartata aishamaha. And lastly we have a followed by au, and a is substituted by aya, and we have the output aya plus au. Here are the examples. Se plus aushadha, this is a compound, and so we have a substituted by aya, so we have the output saya plus aushadha, sayaushadha. When this a comes at the end of the pada, we have the example vartate plus aupagavaha, where a is at the end of the pada followed by au at the beginning of the pada. So 6178 applies and we get the output vartataya plus aupagavaha. And by the application of another rule we get vartata aupagavaha as the optional output. These are the examples where a which is part of h is substituted by aya. Now let us study the examples where o is substituted by our, and these are the template examples where you have o followed by a is substituted by our followed by a, o followed by a is substituted by our followed by a, then we have o followed by e and the output generated is our followed by e, our substituting o. Then we have o followed by e and the output is our followed by e. Input is o followed by u and the output is our followed by u. Similarly, o followed by long u is the input and the application of 6178 generates our followed by long u as the output. Similarly, o followed by ru and the output is our followed by ru. O followed by long ru and the output is our followed by long ru. Input is o followed by lu and the output is our followed by lu. O followed by a is the input and the output is our followed by a. O followed by o being the input, 6178 applies and our followed by o is the output. O followed by I is the input, 6178 applies and our followed by I is the output. O followed by au is the input, 6178 applies and our followed by au is the output that is generated. Let us look at the concrete examples of these templates. First we have o followed by a and the substitute is our and the output is our followed by a. So we have bhano plus us. We are deriving the 1/3 of the word bhanu. So bhanu plus us, and we have the intermediary stage bhano plus us where o is followed by a. So echo yavayavaha applies and bhanav plus us is the output where o is substituted by av, and then we get bhanavas and bhanavaha. Similarly, we have now bhavati, in which we have bhu plus a plus ti, and then bhu becomes bho by the application of other rule in the Ashtadhyayi. And now at this stage bho plus a plus ti, echo yavayavaha applies and o is substituted by av, so the output generated is bhava plus a plus ti, and so you get the form bhavati. Similarly, you have go plus a. Go is the word ending in o, and if we are deriving the instrumental singular of go, we have go followed by a. A is represented by a, so we have examples of a as well. So o followed by a, 6178 applies and the output generated is gava plus a, that is gava. Then we have O followed by E, and the output is Ava followed by E. So we have Bhano plus Iti, where O is at the end of the pada, followed by E, which is an ach at the beginning of another pada, and here we have O being substituted by Ava, and we have Bhanav plus Iti, and we get the form Bhanaviti. Bhanaviti. Then we have Smruto plus Ishvara. U means Shambhu. Smruta is remembered. So, some person for whom Shambhu is remembered. That means somebody is remembering Shiva. That person is called Smruto, a word ending in O. And we have Smruto plus Ishvara. So, Echoyavayava applies, and Smrutau plus Ishvara, that is the output generated. Then we have O plus U, and the output generated is Ava plus U. Once again we have all artificial examples where we have Smruto plus Ukta, something is stated by this Smruto, 6178 applies, and the output generated is Smrutav plus Ukta. Similarly, Smruto plus Udha, Udha beginning with long U, and 6178 applies, and the output generated is Smrutav plus Udha. Then we have O plus Ru as the input, and the output generated is Ava plus Ru. Once again we have artificial examples, Smruto plus Rishi, and this is the compound. So 6178 applies, and O is substituted by Ava, and the output generated is Smrutav plus Rishi. Once again we have Smruto followed by Rukaraha, and now we have Smrutav plus Rukara, and so we get this output by the application of 6178. Then we have O followed by Lu, Smruto plus Lukara. This is the compound, and so Samhita is obligatory, and in this case 6178 applies, O is substituted by Ava, so we get the output Smrutav plus Lukara, and this is by the application of 6178. Then we have O followed by A being the input, 6178 applies, and Ava followed by A is the output. So we have Go plus A. This is the dative singular form that we are deriving, Go followed by A. And in this case 6178 applies, and we get Gava plus A as the output, and Gave is the desired form that is generated. Then we have O followed by O being the input, and Ava followed by O is the output. So we are deriving the 6/2 and 7/2 genitive and locative dual of Go. So we have Go followed by Os, and so 6178 applies, and O is substituted by Ava. So the output generated is Gava plus Os, Gavos and Gavoho. Then we have O followed by I, and the output generated is Ava followed by I. Once again this is a compound. Smruto is an artificial word, Smruto plus Aikya, unity with Smruto, and 6178 applies, and the output generated is Smrutav plus Aikya. Then when we derive the imperative form of the verbal root chi, we have this intermediary stage where we have Chino plus I. This is the first person singular, and then this O becomes Ava. So 6178 applies, and we have Chinava plus I, Chinavai as the output. Then we have O followed by Au, Smruto plus Aushadha as a compound. 6178 applies, O is substituted by Ava, and the output generated is smrutava plus aushadha. To summarize what we have studied so far, we studied the examples of 6178 in detail. We focused on two vowels, namely A and O, and we took as many examples as possible. Many of the examples are artificial, but there is no other way in giving these examples. These examples act in different environments where the substituents and the environment is inside a pada or in between two padas. Now, in order to understand this sutra completely, we need to study the examples where I and au are the vowels which are substituents and the substitutes are I and our respectively. And we shall do this in the next lecture. Thank you for your attention.